Hey guys, I'm Victoria with the Mythic Tome, and today I'm going to talk about Venser. Now, Venser is a brilliant inventor. He wields blue and white magic and specializes in teleportation. Venser was born in Dominaria, in the wasteland of Urborg. Years ago, Urborg had been decimated by the Wrathy Overlay, and it was still tainted by Phyrexia's dark magic. Corpses of Phyrexian abominations turned many bogs on the island into pools of glistening oil. This wasteland is where Venser grew up, and much of his childhood is unknown. We do know that his father was a scavenger, and his mother died sometime before he could remember. The first true loss in Venser's life was when his father was lost to the swamps of Urborg. Venser grew up studying Phyrexian relics, and as an adult, he lived alone in his workshop within the Urborg swamps. All around his workshop were the remains of warships and wreckage left from the Phyrexian invasion of Dominaria. This technology was more advanced than most civilizations. He salvaged parts from the remains of these Phyrexians. Amongst these salvaged remains were two identical power stones. Now, power stones are enigmatic gems once utilized to power countless Thran devices. Venser's activities drew the anger of Lord Windgrace. He is shown here on the card Planeswalker's Fury. Lord Windgrace was a leader and guardian of Urborg. Windgrace, along with his Glade Hunters, guarded Urborg from all artifice and magical machinery. Venser's life here was harsh, and he didn't like it very much. His greatest dream was to leave the foul swamps of his home. Venser was unaware of his latent planeswalker abilities because his spark had not been ignited yet. So, because of his desire to leave, he began to construct a magical teleportation device. He used parts from the heaps of debris that surrounded his home. He called his teleportation device the Ambulator, and it looked similar to a throne. Ambulators were planeswalking devices that were first used by the Phyrexians. When a mortal uses an ambulator, it's a very unpleasant experience, similar to being taken along by a planeswalker. Venser's attempt at the planeswalking device was a huge deal, because planar traffic didn't really exist at this point in time. Venser is one of the few people to ever planeswalk without having an active planeswalker spark. Around this time, the planeswalker Teferi was working to close the time rifts that plagued Dominaria. Venser was born and he grew up near one of these time rifts. So, Teferi was researching the rift right above Urborg when he found Venser. Now, Teferi was interested in both Venser's latent spark and his ambulator. Teferi wanted Venser's help and his devices to rapidly travel across Dominaria to help close the other dangerous time distortions across the plane. From this moment on, Venser's life was forever changed. Teferi had some companions as well. There was Joyra, a Shivan artificer of the Gitu tribe who had studied at the Tolarian Academy with Teferi. Teferi and Joyra are both shown on this card when they were younger at the Tolarian Academy. There was also Radha. She had a planeswalker spark that was similar to Venser's. They were both essentially a new breed of potential planeswalkers, and Radha shared a strange connection with the Time Rift hovering over Sky Shroud. Teferi, Joyra, and Radha also had some guards with them. Venser was accidentally pulled into the Time Rift along with Teferi and his other companions. The whole group was pulled away, bouncing haphazardly through the network of rifts until they were finally deposited upon the cliffs overlooking the shores of Madara, a powerful Dominarian country whose lands had been overrun by the Nekaru, descendants of Wasitora and their followers. The Nekaru are pretty cool. They are cat dragons. At this time, Teferi was lost in the Time Rift. The rest of the group confronted the descendants of the Nekaru. Radha battled the Prince of the Cat Dragons, seemingly to a standstill, but it wasn't Radha that scared the dragons. They were contacted by the disembodied voice of Sensei Ryu. Sensei Ryu was actually Nico Bolas, and he was immensely interested in Radha and Venser's mutated planeswalker sparks. They had these mutated sparks because they were born near a time rift. Bolas took hold of Venser's mind, and he used his will and latent spark to break free from his prison so that he could be reborn into the physical world. Bolas was fascinated by the mutated planeswalkers, and he planned to reward them for their role in his release. They were saved thanks to Joyra's diplomacy, and the sudden return of Teferi, who challenged Bolas to a planeswalkers duel. Venser had to watch helplessly as Bolas demolished Teferi's attacks and defenses. After the battle, Bolas turned his attention to the rest of the group once again. This time, it was Radha, surprisingly, who talked the Elder Dragon from taking more than the life of their guard Aprem. Teferi warned Bolas of the changes the rifts had created, and once Bolas learned of the dire threat against the inhabitants of Kamigawa, Bolas departed. It was then that Joyra suggested that they request the help of the Gitu, who are adept at fire magic and artifice. However, Shiv and the tribe of Gitu had been phased out by Teferi during the Phyrexian invasion. Teferi mended the Shivan rift, but during the process, he lost his planeswalker spark, which made it so that he was unable to travel between planes. The group now needed transportation so they could heal the rest of the time rifts. Venser's talents and ambulator were now invaluable to the group. They needed it for transportation. Venser traveled with Joyra to her tribe of Gitu, where they hoped to improve his teleportation device. With their help and masterful artifice, Venser used Thran metal and newly created power stones to construct a new and better transportation device. As far as Venser's personality goes, he had a pretentious ego and was mainly interested in trying to hook up with Joyra. I feel like that's important to know. He's not just a brilliant artificer, he's kind of obnoxious. So anyway, the Gitu helped him perfect his teleportation device, and they used the new device to travel back to Urborg. During their time in Urborg, Joda, a powerful archmage, appeared. There were definite sparks between Joda and Joyra, and this led Venser to become jealous and petulant with the rest of the group. Joda offered to help Joyra in their quest to stop the further deterioration of Dominaria's space-time continuum. Here in Urborg, Venser became the unfortunate target of the Weaver King's attention. Now, you may not have heard of the Weaver King, but you've most likely heard of his master, Lestrak. A long time ago, the Weaver King had been a brave nomad warrior, but he had been experimented on and corrupted by Phyrexia. The Weaver King worked for 300 years to create a vast web of mental strands between the inhabitants of Urborg, a web which he traveled along like a spider, manipulating people and events for his own entertainment. Venser became the Weaver King's new favorite toy, and he messed with many of Venser's plans. Venser had little choice but to become one of Lord Windgrace's Glade Hunters. By taking the Planeswalker's personal mark upon his skin, Venser was able to keep the Weaver King out of his mind. When Venser returned to Joyra and the group, he witnessed Joyra's call to Karn. Venser agreed to use his ambulator to meet Karn in the Blind Eternities. The Blind Eternities is the space between planes that is filled with chaotic energies. It's also important to note that Venser is one of the few planeswalkers whose planeswalker spark wasn't activated by a huge near-death experience. His was activated by his talent at teleportation. Instead of meeting Karn in the Blind Eternities, Venser met the Weaver King, who was impersonating the Silver Golem. The Weaver King removed Windgrace's mark and infested the young artificer's mind. It wasn't until Karn answered Joyra's call that Venser realized the mistake. Venser was then able to kill the Weaver King through the cunning use of his planeswalking ability in conjunction with his original salvaged Power Stones. Venser then stepped into the Blind Eternities with Karn, and he worked together with Karn to close the Tolarian Rift. Afterward, Venser was able to escape to safety, but Karn was lost in the Blind Eternities. Venser had learned valuable information from the Golem, and he was the last person Karn spoke to before Karn disappeared. With a heavy heart, Venser returned to tell his compatriots of Karn's disappearance. However, he was interrupted by the appearance of Jeska, a barbarian planeswalker who was Karn's apprentice. Jessica was searching for Karn. When they told Jessica what happened, she realized the gravity of the situation and decided to help them, but upon her own terms, claiming that Teferi's methods were no methods at all. Jessica began to study the rifts for herself, and she fell under the mental control of the insidious Leshrac. Jessica defeated and took Rada, believing that Rada would be the key to closing the time rifts without the need to sacrifice her life or spark. She basically was going to use Rada's spark as a buffer. Jessica's actions were being manipulated by Leshrac. In Zhalfir, Jessica used Rada as a mana lens, forcefully closing the Zhalfiran rift. Without precise timing, the phased-out lands of Zhalfir were lost, cast into oblivion. Because Jessica did this without consulting Teferi, she caused the irrevocable loss of the phased-out lands. Venser, Teferi, and Joyra set out to stop Jessica, but grievous damage had already been done to both Rada's Spark and Zhalfir. Eventually, the group was able to stop her. Jessica, now repentant for her previous actions, took responsibility for the last time rift over Ataria. The rift in Ataria's skies was tied to Jessica personally. The rift was caused by her transformation into Corona during the Onslaught storyline, but I'm not going to go into that right now. Venser and Rada surprised Jessica when they volunteered to stand by her and help her face her nemesis. Jessica accepted their help, but it was a trick. Jessica cast Venser and the elf back to ensure that they would not be hurt for her mistake. In the heart of the rift, Jessica faced an image of Corona, the embodiment of the rift. She charged the image of the goddess and shattered it. Jessica spread her planeswalker essence over the rift and over all the rifts in the multiverse connected to it. In one huge discharge of power, through force of will, and with one final sacrifice, Jessica closed all the rifts, allowing the Great Mending to begin. The Mending caused all remaining fractures to heal, first in Dominaria, then spreading throughout the multiverse in a chain reaction. The Mending allowed mana to flow freely through Dominaria once more, returning life and hope to the dying world. It also changed the nature of the Planeswalker Spark forever. Sparks used to give Planeswalkers essentially unlimited power. Venser's Planeswalker Spark only allowed him to travel across the multiverse. He definitely did not have unlimited power. Now that Venser and the group's work was done, the group disbanded. Rada returned to Keld and her war host. Teferi returned to Jamara to help its people rebuild. And Venser gave Joyra the Ambulator as a thank you, and she used it to seek out Joda, Archmage Eternal. At the end of Future Sight, Venser was once again left alone. He planeswalked off to an unknown destination. Venser relied on his knowledge of artifice and teleportation as he traveled around the universe, satisfying his boundless curiosity of all things mechanical. Venser's curiosity was his biggest weakness. It pushed his work dangerously close to that of Yawgmoth. Venser began work on rebuilding and improving a Phyrexian plane-shifting ship. Venser became obsessed with his creations, and he had no idea the powers he was meddling with. The fact that his vessel was made from repurposed Phyrexian technology never caused him any worry, but it should have. He had worked with dead Phyrexian parts for so long that he trivialized and dismissed the real danger they represented. It had been long years since his fateful encounter with Karn, and his mind often wandered to his temporary mentor and Karn's perfect geometric plane, Mirrodin. Everything changed for Venser when he was visited by Koth of the Hammer, a native of Mirrodin who had temporarily joined with Windgrace's acolytes. Koth was accompanied by Elspeth. They came to Venser's workshop because they had been told through eldritch means to find the Artificer. They were unaware of what great significance this visit would have. Venser was convinced of his brilliance and vision, and he wanted to show them his incomplete ship, thinking that they would appreciate it in a way that normal beings could not. When Koth and Elspeth saw the ship, Koth clearly recognized the Phyrexian parts that Venser had salvaged, and he was shocked to find this vessel being rebuilt. Koth flew into a rage because Venser was working on Phyrexian technology. He grabbed Venser by his throat and threatened him, encasing his head in a stone mask. Elspeth was appalled at the sudden violent act, but Koth didn't care, stating simply that he had no choice. Koth then commanded Venser to planeswalk to Mirrodin. Mirrodin was Koth's home plane, and it was being invaded by Phyrexians. Koth believed that Venser needed to see the threat he was unwittingly toying with and what it had done to Koth's home plane. Venser swore vengeance to himself, but secretly he was intrigued to see Mirrodin. This was the perfect opportunity for him to explore the plane that was created by Karn. When Venser arrived in Mirrodin, he immediately began to berate Koth for his lack of tact and sheer audacity. Despite Koth's dire warnings, Venser found Mirrodin fascinating, and he didn't see anything particularly threatening about it. Venser continued his tirade against the Geomancer, and he was actually disappointed that the conflict was not of an especially epic scale. Koth told Venser and Elspeth of the conflicts that raged across the surface, and of the dark threat that threatened the plane itself. Koth decided it would be best to find an old friend who could help him explain the true enemy to Venser. The trio looked for Koth's acquaintance, and they found the Mephidros stretching farther than they could possibly have expected. The trio was then ambushed by a group of Nim. The companions quickly fought off the Nim. Then, before they could plot an expedition deeper into the swamps, Elspeth told the arguing planeswalkers that she could not go any farther. Unfortunately, without Elspeth and her warriors' expertise, Venser and Koth quickly fell to a corrupted harvester, and they were dragged back to its lair near Ishsha. Koth awoke under harsh lights, strapped to a table next to Venser. He quickly freed himself, but he could not rouse Venser before the Phyrexians arrived. Koth fought them off, but was overpowered as Venser prepared to teleport them both out of the surgical theater. Suddenly, Elspeth reappeared. With her help, the trio subdued their captors and proceeded to the Black Lacuna. Venser was finally beginning to understand the threat living Phyrexians posed. Koth had been right, these new Phyrexians needed to be stopped. Venser teleported inside for recon and was horrified by the sheer number of forces within. In a panic, he teleported further within until he encountered a gigantic shrine erected to Karn. Karn had lost his planeswalker spark when he closed the Tolarian time rift, and now he was trapped on Mirrodin. At this shrine, Venser was assaulted by Geth and was forced to flee back to the surface, where he and his companions witnessed the emergence of a Phyrexian army that was invading the surface. After several hours, the army passed, and the three companions entered the vault, following a mirror secretly set by Tezzeret to guide them. The mirror led them to Geth, and in secret, they followed him into the interior of the world. They came upon a butchering room, in which they engaged massive Phyrexian butchers. Elspeth slew many, but they were outnumbered, and they had to escape through a meat shaft. The shaft brought them further into Mirrodin's underground. When they emerged from the meat shaft, they encountered Azuri, leader of a resistance movement for Mirrodin. While Venser insisted that they had to continue to find Karn, Azuri said that he could allow them to go no further. Azuri revealed to them that the Phyrexian invasion had profited him greatly, catapulting him into a heroic leadership position that he was unwilling to give up. When Elspeth threatened Azuri, the elf backed down, and his followers fled after Venser displayed his magic. Koth, Elspeth, and Venser continued on further towards Mirrodin's core, eventually being met by Tezzeret. Tezzeret led the companions to a surgery room, where Elspeth was angered by the sight of Phyrexians experimenting on creatures. She flew into a rage, slaying all the Phyrexians in the room in a matter of moments. They freed the fleshling Melira from the cages. She was called a fleshling because she was born with a body that was totally free from the metallic growths that occurred on the plane. This made her immune to phyresis. Phyresis is the transformation of a living thing into a Phyrexian creature. Tezzeret said Melira was a gift to them because she was completely immune to the effects of Phyrexian corruption. During the subsequent travels, Elspeth grew very close to Melira and was very protective of her. The group began traveling back towards the surface, but they were surrounded and attacked by a massive force of Phyrexians. During the battle, Elspeth was the center of the Phyrexians' attention. Elspeth slayed most of them and created piles of dead around her so high that the other companions lost sight of her. The companions eventually found Azuri's rebel camp, where they were welcomed despite their previous encounter. Melira's ability to grant immunity to phyresis was discovered here. She was able to heal others of corruption. She healed all those in the camp who were infected by the glistening oil, which is the viral substance engineered by the Phyrexians to spread corruption. She healed non-stop for several days while Elspeth sat with her in the tent speaking to her. Once everyone in the camp was healed, a council was called. Azuri was hoping to become more influential, and he invited Melira to stay with them while suddenly telling her companions to leave. However, Melira said that she would leave with her companions. The group then prepared to leave. They were going to try to make it to the core once again, in the hope of finding Karn. While the group was leaving, the camp was attacked by Tezzeret's Phyrexians, and the companions found a guide to take them to the core. The group left the battle and followed the guide, of whom only Elspeth was trusting. The guide led them deep into Mirrodin's core, encountering many strange rooms and caverns. At one point, they did battle with two strange Phyrexian angels. Elspeth killed one with a throwing knife, and the other she decapitated while it attacked Venser. During the battle, Koth became angry at the party for their lack of progress and for ignoring the surface war. Koth took Melira and they left, leaving Venser and Elspeth alone with the guide. They hurried after Koth, but were ambushed by Tezzeret's Phyrexians. Elspeth went into a battle fury, wiping out the massive force, but just as she killed the last of them, an even larger force appeared. The situation was hopeless, but Elspeth continued in her attack, cutting down the Phyrexians until Tezzeret ordered a halt to the battle and captured Elspeth and Venser. The Phyrexians carried the planeswalkers away. While their captors were trying to figure out how to access a doorway, both Koth and Melira reappeared and freed Venser and Elspeth before sneaking away. By the time the Phyrexians realized that their captives were gone, the party was already running. Venser's strength, however, was wearing thin, and they were forced to stop. One important thing to mention is that Venser would often feel sudden pains because he suffered from a disease. The disease is never fully explained, although he most likely contracted it because of his work with Power Stones. Venser used Blinkmoth serum to treat his illness and relieve these pains, but Venser became addicted to the Blinkmoth serum. He was essentially a drug addict. He even suffered from withdrawal symptoms. So anyway, they were forced to stop running because Venser's strength was wearing thin. Venser was able to create an explosive from the metal on the walls, and he blew up part of the tunnel, sealing it temporarily. But it was only a matter of time before a group of Phyrexians led by Glissa Sunseeker broke through. While Glissa Sunseeker was taunting them, Tezzeret appeared and his forces did battle with Glissa's. This allowed the companions to escape and reach Karn's throne room uninterrupted. There they found Karn being corrupted by the Phyrexian oil. Karn was called the Father of Machines, the most powerful position in New Phyrexia. Without knowing it, Karn had carried a trace of Phyrexian oil within him, inside the Phyrexian Heartstone that was granted to him long ago by Urza. Karn left traces of the oil in his travels from plane to plane, including Mirrodin. When they found Karn, he could barely remember who he was. His few lucid moments were memories of his creator Urza, and the chaotic events of the Mending. Melira told Venser and his party that the oil only turns a being into a full Phyrexian if the heart is fully corrupted. By the time Venser reached Karn, it was already too late. Melira cleansed Karn's body of the Phyrexian taint, but she said the golem's heart was incurable. Karn's heartstone was already corrupted by phyresis, and it was past the point of no return. The heartstone would always corrupt Karn again. Venser thought of a solution. He knew that his own life would soon be forfeit due to his increasing phthisis symptoms. Venser told the others that he was dying, and he had been for years, and that it was unlikely he would last much longer. Instead of dying from the poisoning, he would go out on his own terms. Venser made the ultimate sacrifice to save Karn. One interesting thing is you might notice that Venser's shoulder armor mimics Karn's shoulder design. With Venser's last strength and remaining mana, he used his teleportation magic to transfer his life force and planeswalker spark into Karn's heart, which resulted in Karn receiving a purified heart, Venser's immunity, and it restored Karn's planeswalking powers, while costing Venser his life. Moments later, Karn was cured and lucid once again. He mourned the loss of Venser briefly, but then he turned to the battle with the Phyrexians, stating, "He still has a lot of work ahead of him." Now that is the end of Venser's story, but I would like to discuss a theory I heard. Now this is entirely speculation, however I found it very intriguing. Because Karn, Elspeth, and Koth left Venser's body right where he died, what if Venser was later completed by the Phyrexians and Jin Gitaxias? What if he worked with them to create a planar portal? Venser would be the perfect person to create this technology. I mean, he has plenty of experience with it, and he's a master of teleportation. This would mean that the Phyrexians could finally travel to other planes. I love the quote, "The Gitaxians whisper amongst themselves of other worlds. If they exist, we must bring Phyrexia's magnificence to them." At the end of my Ursa video, I recommended reading the Magic the Gathering books if you wanted to learn more. However, as far as the books go for this series, I would not recommend them. They have so many major plot holes and discrepancies with the rest of the Magic the Gathering lore. And on top of that, they ruin all of the characters. Venser is extremely obnoxious, and he's a horrible main character to follow. The books just really aren't great. There are misspellings of names, and the author clearly didn't know enough about Magic the Gathering lore when he wrote them. So that's Venser's story. I hope you enjoyed watching. Please like, subscribe, or leave a comment if you want to see me make a video on something else, another planeswalker maybe, or literally anything Magic the Gathering related. Thank you, bye!